Thank you. If we can start with the roll call, please.
I can go. Dr. Corbin?
Present.
Alana?
Here.
Bonnie?
Present.
Casey? I think I see Casey. I'm assuming you're present since I see your name on the Zoom. David is absent. Chris?
Present.
Adam? I don't see Adam on here. Adrian? Is she here? Aaron is absent. Sabrina? Absent. Allie? Absent. Adam, I saw you sign on, so I will mark you as present. Matt?
Present.
Patty?
Present.
Suen?
Present.
Jonathan?
Present.
And Randy?
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Before we get officially, well, we're officially started, before we get into the agenda, I would like to propose to the board that we extend the meeting time by 30 minutes to accommodate our community speakers. With the understanding that we'll go no lot later than 7:30. And I want to put that out there, and if I can get a second. All of those agreements to extend our meeting till 7:30 to extend the community comments. If I can get a vote.
I support that, but I have a hard stop.
That's absolutely fine.
But I do support that.
I appreciate that. That's why we're asking. All those
Should make sure not only that helps support.
Yes, that's what I'm going to do with the hands. Those who can stay, and let's say those who are willing to stay till 7:30, if I can get a raise of hands that you're able to stay and willing to. Looks like we have a quorum. Thank you so much, folks. So with that said, we're going to have the comments happen. We'll let you know, and we'll call you by name. Thank you so much, Jody. And so we'll have 20 minutes at the beginning, and you will also have time at the end for you to comment because we do have to complete business, but we're willing to stay a half an hour to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. I hope that satisfies everybody. Great, thank you. And Deputy Director Todd, if you want to start.
Make the statement about Monville.
Yeah,
sure. So I just wanted to share, many of you have read this probably in media reports or shared an update from Director Long, but just wanted to share again for public record and for this meeting. Portland Parks and Recreation regrets to share that a young girl was found unresponsive in the water at Montebello Pool on Friday night, August 25th, 2023. Portland Parks and Recreation staff performed CPR until paramedics arrived and transported her to a hospital. We're sad to inform the community that the young girl passed away on Monday, August 28th. Portland Parks and Recreation is committed to responding to this incident with utmost care and empathy, and out of respect for her family, we're not sharing the girl's identity at this time. Portland Parks and Recreation staff are working with other city teams to see what we can learn from the incident.
Thank you. Our hearts go out to the family, the Montebello community, and the Portland Parks and Recreation staff. The board would like to hold a moment of silence in acknowledgement of this tragic loss. If we can start our moment of silence, please. Thank you. You're going to move to public comments. The first person that we have is Tanya Lynn March. Dr. Tanya Lynn March. Thank you for coming. You do have 2 minutes if you can give me a second. Please refrain from giving out your personal information, no phone numbers or email addresses. Staff will follow up with you if they need to get your contact information after you speak. So we want to make sure that everybody's information stays their own. You have 2 minutes. Get my timer together. Okay, you can start when you're ready. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I know that a lot of people from Grant High School are here. I have a child who is at Roosevelt, and I want to support them, although that's not the issue I came here for today, just to say that my child, if he was to go out to Marshall from Roosevelt, probably miss 2 class periods by having that transition. So though my child is not a student at Grant, I think it is a hardship for parents across the city when away games are played out at Marshall, and that could be more central. I'm also concerned in general. I would really like to see more cooperation between Portland Public Schools and Portland Parks and Recreation. Back in 1975, when ordinance number 140789 was created, Metropolitan Learning Center had Parks and Recreation staff on site, a swimming pool that was operated by Portland Parks and Rec, and a Sun School program. We've lost all of that. Cooch Park, which I represent, which I've helped raise much money to have that beautiful accessible playground at, is not usable currently by the school in any sort of safe capacity. It's been on the news quite frequently this month. The ordinance stated that the school district shall have reasonable access to the park during school hours and may utilize the park as is needed and appropriate in connection with the operation of its school. The school district and the city will work cooperatively in coordinating programs and activities conducted at the park so as to avoid conflicts and competing uses. So when the dog park went in 2001, the off-leash dog area, it was given to the school hours so the children could still use that play area for soccer and other access. When Northwest Children's Theater was in the area and Portland Public School children would come to see plays, they could picnic in that area in the park and use the school bathroom. As a person who does walking tours and history tours in the area, I am very concerned because the school community is seeking to have the restroom closed, a restroom that the public needs.
I'm sorry that it's out of time. Thank you. The next person that we have for public comment is Todd Zarnitz. Hi, please correct me.
Todd Zarnitz.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks. Hi.
And just a reminder, please make sure that your personal information stays your own, so don't share your phone number or email address when you're talking.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Thank you. As you know, time is running out on Slabtown Park. The Conway Master Plan, which is the Slabtown area, offers a 1-acre park to the city and doesn't require the city to take it. However, it's the city's opportunity to take it. The city doesn't have to take it. At the end of the year, the Conway Master Plan sunsets, and so does the obligation for the park and the chance to acquire the park. The land is currently owned by Guardian Real Estate. The city wants Guardian to remediate the land before offering it to the city, even though Guardian is not required to turn over the land to the city in the first place. And Guardian, along with many other developers in the Slabtown area, have already paid parks millions of dollars in system development charges. About 0 of these SDCs have been reinvested in my district, the Northwest District. If the land isn't turned over to the city by the end of the year to have this amazing urban park in the middle of a very dense neighborhood, the park will be lost and anything can happen, including the person that owns the land, Guardian Real Estate, could redevelop the land into 4 apartment units. So we have a couple months left to make a serious effort to acquire this land from Garden State as outlined in the Conway Master Plan. And please take the time to take a look at this issue and take some action, because we could lose an acre of beautiful, what could be a beautiful park in the middle of the Northwest District. This opportunity doesn't really come along ever, and it might slip through our fingers. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. The next person that we have is Camille Russell. Please come up for public comment.
You.
As you know,
Good evening.
just really repeating, make sure that your personal information stays your own. So we have 2 minutes. Go ahead and get started when you're ready.
My name is Camille Russell. I'm here representing the Grant Gives board. Grant Gives, and I also have a kid at Grant. But Grant Gives is a parent-led board. Formerly, we were known as the Boosters Club. And we raise money and support kids involved in clubs and after-school programs and sports teams. And these are mostly programs that don't get a ton of PPS or any PPS support. We hold events and fundraisers throughout the year. And one event that we were going to support this year was the Centennial Committee. And that event has unfortunately been canceled because it was supposed to take place on the bowl. So I'm here to show support for the parks leasing the bowl back to the high school or to PPS, so that the bowl is, in our opinion, for Grant Gives, the living room of our high school. It's a place where kids can hang out, they can go at night, it's a safe place for them to go. Unfortunately, because we don't have bleachers or lights, it really isn't a great place for them to gather during sports events. My other hat is I have a daughter who goes to Grant and plays soccer, and we've been going to games around Portland and outside of Portland, and they have these beautiful stadiums with bleachers. And what I've noticed is all the kids gathering there and talking and having fun, and not only watching the sport, but it's a lot of great social development for them. So we at Grant Gives are definitely, if this were to happen, would be involved in any sort of fundraising and infrastructure. As a 501c3, we have the ability to be a support for this group and for the groups like the one behind me who you'll hear from next. So I'm here to support that and to continue to support the kids involved in extracurriculars at Grant.
Thank you so much. Kim,
Take care.
thank you for coming. Probably heard me.
Yes, I promise not to get my personal information.
All right, go ahead and get started when you are ready. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I'm the parent of a Grant High School senior and a member of the Grant Bowl Community Coalition. I have a senior who plays soccer at Grant. Our commission formed on August 15th, just days after Portland Parks abruptly announced the closure of the Grant Bowl to Grant student athletes 1 day before fall sports began. I'm here to ask you to urge Director Long and Commissioner Ryan to turn over operation of the Grant Bowl to PPS. Parks has owned the bowl for its entire existence. What are the results of that ownership? Parks failed to maintain or replace the turf field that the community and PPS paid over $1.3 million for. Parks paid a minority share. Grant is the only school in PPS without stands or lights, and that's almost entirely Parks' fault. Grant athletes are forced to practice and play all over the city, increasing carbon emissions and causing the loss of thousands of hours of instructional time. Our girls soccer students have to go to Delta Park to practice and to play their home games. They miss an hour and 15 minutes for every single home game. That's 463 missed hours just in September. Parks tells us they have a $600 million maintenance backlog. I don't doubt that. Parks had no plan to replace this field. They were happy to shutter it indefinitely. Portland Public Schools passed a resolution last week urging the Parks Department to turn over operation of the bowl to PPS. PPS is prepared to fund the field. It doesn't need any money. You can keep your backlog from Parks. It's past time for PP&R to turn over operation of the Grant Bowl to PPS. Parks already leases the field at Buckman Park to a private soccer club. Why wouldn't it be willing to do the exact same thing to its own school district? This is a win-win for Parks. Parks rids itself of the liability of what it calls a failed asset, but we call our living room. And Grant student athletes can return to their home field as quickly as possible. PPS is also prepared to implement and fund the master plan and finally give Grant the same equitable athletic facilities of every other school in Portland Parks. Please urge Director Long and Commissioner Ryan to lease the Grant Bowl to PPS. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Colin McLean. Thank you. You have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Ready, go ahead and start.
Okay, yeah, so Colin McLean, I'm a Grant alumni and a Grant soccer coach. And so I would like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And when you guys decided to close days before school started, I was trying to figure out why. And I could only come up with, you guys are busy. It's hard to juggle hundreds of parks. And obviously this wasn't a priority for you guys. Now you've let us down. You've let hundreds of kids down, their friends, their parents, and pretty much the entire community. This after about 2 years of COVID, when you know it was held. Now we have 8 teams sharing one baseball field from 4 to 9 p.m. And you can imagine how terrible this is for all these kids trying to juggle one field. From a creative standpoint, I don't know why you didn't come to the community earlier looking for a bridge to fund this field. It's an open community. We have resources, we can talk. So I don't know why you didn't come to the community. Now, unfortunately, nobody trusts you, and we can't trust you to maintain the field. It's time you give us our lease so we can have full control over it. Obviously, it would still be open to the community if you are weary of that. Like when it goes to the grant student athletes first, and then it's open for the remainder of the day. And pretty much the fall season is the one season where we're going to be not necessarily shut down, but busy. But then it's open during the day, and then from there on out, it's open. So I strongly encourage you guys to give us our lease so we can have control. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers online?
Yes, we do. Virginia.
Hi, hold on, let me turn on my video. Sorry. Thanks for letting me talk really quickly. Do I need to give like spelling of name or anything like that, or just go for it?
Virginia, I think I have it displayed on here, so I think you're good to go for
Thank
2 minutes.
So thanks so much. So I'm speaking today as a member of the Grant Bowl Community Coalition, and I'm also a parent of a Grant High School senior and an incoming freshman next year. So I'm in it for the long haul. And I've lived in the Grant Park neighborhood for 13 years now, and it's long enough to remember when there were bake sales and car washes in the neighborhood to raise the money for the turf in the bowl that was just closed to our students. I love what the representative for Grant Gives said when she called the Grant Bowl the living room of our high school. It's really the living room of our entire community, the 5 neighborhoods that surround the area. And I actually wanted to share my empathy for the parents of student athletes that are shouldering a tremendous burden of figuring out how to manage the transportation for their kids, the loss of instructional hours, and the loss of 2 hours of homework time to travel time every day. It's almost insurmountable. I'm actually not the parent of a student athlete anymore, but I look at this as an all student issue. I'm here like as a show, it's solidarity with these parents, because I'm actually a board member for Friends of Grant Music. And this would be tantamount to someone walking in, a public official walking in and announcing one day that our rehearsal rooms and our stage would be shut down immediately because the floor couldn't be replaced right away. And, go figure it out, drive across the city and just, get it done. So even if students aren't on a team or aren't part of these things, when we have, sports and, a living room like this, like it brings all students together. This is about, students coming out and being able to be fans, like have a community, come out for homecoming, those, things, iconic memories you have of high school that they lost due to one of the longest shutdowns due to COVID. So this is just heart-wrenching for these kids. We have 2,200 students, and it's hard on the parents too. And what makes it most difficult is we know we have a solution in front of us, which would be to Parks would lease the field to PPS exactly the same way they leased Buckman to PCU. PPS is ready to pay for it. And, it makes sense. We use the
Virginia,
field.
I'm going to cut you
I
off.
knew I was getting there.
Apologies. Thank you.
And then I saw Soren Underdahl log on. I don't know if you wanted to give public testimony, Soren. I'm going to take the lack of responses. There's no, not today. Okay. Jake Wicks had said you wanted to give public testimony.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm on my husband's Zoom account. So my name is Sarah Betts. I just wanted to, I submitted an email a little bit ago as well, but I wanted to present maybe a slightly different perspective from folks. I'm actually a neighbor. I live directly across the street from Grant Park on US Grant Place. And we have a slightly different, I think, perspective than from the Community Coalition. I've actually been kind of a little disheartened thus far to see some of the messaging around the community support for this project. I think that's not necessarily true of those of us that live directly across in this neighborhood. We feel sort of a lack of engagement and involvement from all sides on this perspective. We deal with a lot of traffic and people and noise as it relates not just to the school, but to athletics. And my concern personally with the Portland Parks Department giving a long-term lease to PPS is that this becomes not just about replacing the field, but about adding grandstands and adding lights and inducing more people and more traffic and more use of this area. And I think, you know, from our perspective too, there's been sort of a lack of public involvement and engagement for prior phases of work that's being done at Grant Park, including the softball field. And I'm very wary of that happening again in this instance as well. I want to be clear that I do support replacement of the field. I think that's necessary. And I do think that the messaging and timing of that has been unfortunate. But I do not support long-term lease of this property to PPS, nor continued development of the master plan. And I just hope that with these decisions moving forward, that there's some time and thought put into any long-term decisions. I do support short-term solutions for replacing the field, but I would urge us to maybe move a little more slowly and be more thoughtful about our engagement for anything beyond that. So thank you.
Thank you. You're at time. Do we have any more speakers for public comment?
I would like to do public comment.
Yeah.
I would like to. I'm Stephanie Antipop. Okay. I didn't put my name down, but I'm one.
Okay, right. So we have one more. Do we have anybody else? I just want, because okay, after this, we'll have another opportunity at the end of the meeting. So Stephanie, yeah, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes, and then we're going to get back on our agenda.
So Stephanie Antipop, I have a freshman at Grant, and I also have a kindergartner at Alameda. So I am also in it for the long haul. I've also been in this community for 10 plus years. My children are 4th generation Grant kids. And our entire family has suffered in the sense that they've never been able to play a football game at Grant. They've never been able to be part of a community as part of their school. They've never had their classmates cheer them on the way that every other Portland public school has. So I get that there is I get that there's divide where potentially neighbors of the Grant field want to be involved. And I agree with that. But we also have to look at the well-being of our kids. Our kids are losing 1,000+ hours this month because we could not come together as a community before the day before the school started, before our kids were set to practice. Like, everyone in this room has to look at this as a failure. We could have communicated this earlier. This could have been prevented. We could have done something, and we failed our kids. Both PPS and Parks have failed our kids. And we need to look at that, and that's reality at this point, and we need to have both a long-term and a short-term solution identified to get those kids back in their community, to get a community behind them so that they understand that there's people and adults who care. Because what everyone showed those kids is that that's not the reality. Their city doesn't stand behind them. Their school district doesn't stand behind them. And I urge this committee and this board to really think long and hard about that. So, thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to conclude the comments section. We have one more. After this, we're not going to take another person until the end. We're still good on time. So is that Rich? Or
yes.
Rich's iPhone? You have 2 minutes, and this will be the last commenter for this session. We'll have another session at the at 7 o'clock.
Thank you. I wanted to reiterate what Todd Zarnitz brought up about the importance of the Slabtown Park being accepted by Portland Parks and Recreation so that we can lock down this park, which is going to be right across the street from a new library, which will really make the Northwest District, that Northwest District area very welcoming to all the new families who are moving in there. A second point I wanted to raise was that Wallace Park has 2 tennis courts, which are currently unusable because they have huge cracks going through them and plants growing through them, and they desperately need resurfacing. So I just wanted to mention, as I say, the Slabtown Park and how important it is for the Northwest District, and also the sorry state of the Wallace Park tennis courts, which are the only tennis courts in the only public tennis courts in the area of the Northwest District. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So that concludes our first part of the community comments section. We're going to move to general announcements. Are there any general announcements? Okay, thank you. We're going to move to the approval of August meeting minutes. Do we have any edits, correction on the minutes from last month?
I move we approve the minutes as submitted.
Wonderful. Do you have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Thanks. That looks like unanimous. Thank you. And we're going to move to Deputy Director's report.
That's me.
Yes.
All right. Just make a couple updates. So Grant Field, thank you everyone for coming. I attended the PBS board meeting last Tuesday when PBS, I don't know if everyone's been following this issue very closely, but PBS board passed a resolution encouraging PBS staff to work with the city, Portland Parks Recreation, to negotiate a longer term lease for exclusive use of the bowl or control of the bowl. And then so then they could make improvements there. Prior to that, PPS board chair Gary Hollins and Commissioner Dan Ryan made a commitment to replace the artificial turf as soon as possible. Portland Public Schools project team is looking into doing the cost estimating, coming back with timelines, so then we understand how much both parties may have to contribute to that project. So we're waiting for that information still from Portland Public School project staff. We expect that shortly. And the resolution notes that they would like the construction project to be done as soon as possible, even this fall. The PPS project manager reported that due to seasonality, and then also there might be some benefit to the school community of not doing the project until after the track season. And so that's an open discussion within PPS still about maybe waiting till right when the rains end, get the project done so football is ready to go for football season in August 2024. But that's something that's still being discussed at PPS. The resolution does state that they would like to do it as soon as possible, even this fall. I don't know if anyone tracks how you do a synthetic turf, but it's basically turf, but then also crumb rubber on top, and crumb rubber is spread when it's not wet outside. And that was one of the issues of the delay of the field itself, is that these fields last about 10 years. So this field is 10 years old. We had testing done late last calendar year that showed that the field was in places becoming too hard and not safe for play. We were told by our independent contractor to wait to spread crumb rubber till May. When we did that, we did testing again and failed the testing. PPS expressed interest in trying to do the repair themselves. And so they went out and made their attempt of their own independent testing. And then unfortunately, that's what put the timeline right up to the beginning of the sports season. And so I know it's frustrating. I think someone said it, kind of failure between PPS and Portland Parks and Recreation. I just want you to know, like, all of that information was shared with the school district. They're aware of that information. So that's not something that only we had. Anyways, that's not what the community wants. They want their field restored. We appreciate that. So that's a commitment that both PPS board chair and city commissioner Dan Ryan made on the 21st of August. So that's kind of where we are now. We're waiting for PPS to come back with us for cost estimates and timelines, and then we'll bring back a recommendation to Director Long and Commissioner Ryan on what that might mean for costs for Parks and Recreation. Are there any questions on that before I move forward? Yes.
I'll bite. So it sounds like the conversation that has been had so far, understanding that this is not what the community is asking for, is around working together on an expedited timeline for replacement, but probably within something that looks more like the type of partnership that exists now.
So everything's on the table. So PPS board passed the resolution asking for a long-term lease. So that was on September 5th. The 21st prior to that, when
the conversations were prior to that.
That's right. And so you didn't pick up on the policy choices here, is that we have parks that are open to everybody. We normally don't put fences around parks. We really don't. Dog parks maybe. And so our sports fields are, except when they're permitted out, are open to everybody. That's not always the case for high school fields. Oftentimes for security reasons, school control reasons, there will be fences up. They will permit out to other community sports users when the school's not using it, but it's a very different dynamic than the grant bowl. And so it's not clear yet. I know the community is proposing, or some, I shouldn't say the community, thank you. Who was it? Sarah, yeah. Sarah made the point. Is that the student community, athletic community is proposing embracing the master plan. So that's like bleachers, lights. There's the open question about access, public access to the property. For instance, right now, the upper field, which part of that is Portland Parks and Recreation property, technically, but that's currently behind a fence right now. So that's not open to the public right now. And so that wasn't the original vision, but for lots of good reasons, right? Our schools have a little different security profile than public parks. And so right now the upper field, for instance, is behind a closed fence. So these are the dynamics that and the policy choices that need to be made. And so, for instance, when we first had the field developed in 2013, that was one of the choices. So Parks put in about $450,000 of funding, which is about a quarter of the total project cost, because that was about what the public access and use is. And what we've learned over the last 10 years is with school days and student athlete use, it's about 2/3 of the time, and about 1/3 of the time currently it's open for the public. So that's the kind of thing we need to figure out going forward. If there was a long-term lease, would it actually be open? Would there be fences? Would there be public access? Or another choice would be if there was like a school, like a Roosevelt or another school or Lincoln High School, where it truly is behind a fence, then should there be some other arrangement so community can go play at other places? And that truly is a more exclusive area for Grant High School students. So those are kind of policy choices.
And it just moves forward, not turned over, not behind a fence, but with the type of partnership we've had in the past. Does this field then get bumped up the priority list in terms of our maintenance priorities and the other things that are on that list, or?
Right. So it got the regular maintenance throughout the 10 years. So these fields need to be replaced every 10 years. So synthetic fields, you get a high use, maybe 4 or 5 times the amount of use you'd get on a normal grass field, but then you also have to spend $1 million every 10 years or so to replace those fields, which you don't have to do with grass fields. So that's kind of the choices. Yeah, we have a big park system. There's a lot of choices to be made. And so that's where I think we obviously hear from the grant community. They want certainty that in 10 years from now, we don't have the same problem.
A question. So during that discussion, was there any interim solution discussed? I mean, because it is a process, you have to get estimates and what have you.
I think they feel like they're going to turn that around pretty quick. So in weeks.
But I mean, turning it around and getting an estimate, but actually installing it, it would probably, I mean, if it's
so that's, yeah, we're waiting.
It's going to
right.
be.
So we're waiting. So we're waiting to hear from PPS. I think some of you were there that night. And so I think they've gotten the direction from their board to use every kind of, I think one of their board members said, like, treat it like, you know, a roof's falling on one of our students at school. It's an emergency procurement, should move as fast as possible. And so I think they're doing that on their end, but there still is this choice about maybe constructionability can't actually occur because of the rainy season and laying down all the turf, and that might actually affect the track season. So they've got some choices to make on their side about when the best construction window is.
I guess even pushing it further,
sure.
More like, I mean, it will take time, whether it's 6 months, 3 months, 8 months, but what's the solution for the grant community? Where do they go? How does it work? Was that discussed, I guess? What's the solution so that they don't have to go to Delta Park or Marshall or wherever?
In the short term, that is the only solution. We've offered all of the available fields that we have. And so we've worked with them to find, and same thing for the rest of the, if it happens to go until next summer, that if they need access to other parks fields. So we have about 100-year-old relationship with Portland Public Schools. So they're using swimming pools, tracks, fields for cross countries, tennis courts. That's unique. The other 4 school districts in Portland don't do that. They fund their own sports facilities. They have their own sports facilities. So this is like a unique relationship. Likewise, we have community gardens on some school property. We access their gyms for the Golden Ball program. So that's part of this partnership. But part of the partnership is that we live with the strengths and weaknesses of each partner. One of the community gardens was recently closed at a redeveloped school site. UPS didn't build a new community garden, and community gardens closed right now. Like, so this is part of, I mean, we can aspire to be better partners and work better together so we don't have these, you know, gaps in service, but that is part of the tension of we're trying to look for opportunities where community access and sports access for students can kind of 1 + 1 = 3, but there is a tension point, just like we're closing a community garden for the expansion of a school. I mean, that does happen.
So what is the process for staying, sorry, what is the process for staying on top of, you know, timelines in the partnership and, you know, resolving areas of disputes or that sort of thing? Just kind of.
So I think it was maybe 12 years ago, we entered into kind of listed all of our overlap partnership agreements of all the sites. We put it all finally in one agreement. That happened about like 12 years ago. That got refreshed for all the sports field uses. And we're on an ongoing kind of discussion about kind of the real estate sharing of the partnership right now. It's complicated. We have lots of sites where we've invested resources that are almost only used by PPS. And sometimes we have, like I said, community gardens, which is truly being used by community gardens, not even necessarily a school group. I had some other things, but I'm going to leave that and just put it in the notes. They're just highlighting some upcoming events because I know we've got a lot of things tonight.
We have 2 minutes. So if there's anything that you want to like spring to the top part, let us know. That'd be great.
So sure. So Mill Park, if any of the board members were interested in joining Commissioner Ryan and Director Long, the Mill Park groundbreaking is happening. It'll be Thursday, September 28th. from 6 to 7 that evening. And it's a great site. It's been totally undeveloped. There's been a great community engagement. There's going to be a lot of community partners there. So it's kind of those are always fun if people want to get out and meet people in the community, especially that project. It's really, really exciting. And I'll just leave it at that and go on to other items.
Thank you, Todd.
Sure.
Dr. Corbin, I just wanted to acknowledge Virginia's comment. She said she has the grant community survey that was conducted by the Grant Bowl Community Coalition. If we wanted to talk about it, I'm gonna go ahead and say that because we have such a robust agenda, we're already over time, that we probably won't have time to discuss it today. If you want to send it to us, I'm gonna put my email in the comments, and then you can send that to me and I will forward it to the board.
Happy to do that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So moving along to working.
Sorry. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
With respect to the director's report that was in the
monthly
report?
Yeah.
So first, well, let me start by thanking the community members who came and wanted to acknowledge that, you know, maintenance is a huge issue for the Bureau, and it is something that the board has been repeating over and over. So thank you. And I do think that I appreciate Todd, you know, talking a lot about the partnership that is challenging between the Bureau and PPS, and I've seen it across a lot of other assets as well. I'm not only alum, I'm also the parent of a collegiate athlete who did her sport at Grant. So I'm totally empathetic. I wanted to ask, so thank you. I wanted to ask you specifically though, I noticed in the director's report for this month about the closure of Mount Scott. And also because we heard from the community member talking about the closure of Buckman Pool. And as we know, we also had the closure relatively recently as well of the MLC pool. Sorry, she was referencing the MLC pool and the Buckman Pool. And now with Columbia Pool closed, you know, and Mount Scott is going to be one of the main ones to absorb that issue, especially in light of the fact that we did have a recent really unfortunate drowning. I'm concerned about the access of the community generally to water safety and things. I know we're already working hard to see how to try to expedite the North Portland Community Center and the aquatics facility there, as well as trying to support that community with transportation to other pools. What else can we do with, again, we're talking about a population that's continuing to grow and the number of pools that is shrinking. We need to provide access to our community through these really important assets and, you know, skills, recreation services, so that they have these skills. Can we spend a little bit of time on that? Because I think it's really important.
Sure. So Mount Scott is being temporarily closed because it's being restored. And so that is where we've been able to pull together a variety of different funding sources to be able to restore Mount Scott. So there is a temporary closure, but then we're going to have a brand new full service community center at Mount Scott. So that's exciting. Water safety is kind of high priority of all the things in aquatics, you know, for competitive swimming and other things. And so I know the aquatics team has been working on some different ideas about trying to highlight how we might be able to have, again, a partnership with schools around bringing students to our aquatics facilities for water safety. So maybe that's a future agenda item we can have at the board. We talk more about that. One of the challenges will be about school time, but we had that relationship with Rosa Parks and Columbia Pools. So we know it's possible to bring elementary school students to our facilities, and that also is during the weekday. Those are low peak times for the schools, so we actually have some capacity and do water instruction for students, so people kind of have those basic life-saving skills in water.
Right, so for the closure time, I mean, and I get that there needs to be some upgrades there and, you know, understand that, but for the closure time, I mean, it's not going to be an unsubstantial length of closure. And you know, we're already transporting the community from North Portland to other, I mean, this, in terms of indoor pools, we're limited to Fishman, East Portland. That's it, right?
Southwest.
Oh, Southwest. Worry about them. So how can we ensure that, you know, the community has access to those resources? Are we, I mean, I understand staffing is an issue as well, right? So I guess I kind of want to just continue pushing on that to ensure that, you know, we've got both staffing in place and then ensuring that the community has access and supporting them with transportation and other needs, given that the geographic disparity is great here. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank
Maybe
you.
we could have that as either a committee item or bring it back to the full board.
Yeah, let's have a conversation about that, especially within the working groups. And then I'm hoping that the chairs can bring it to the Board Affairs Working Group and make decisions on how to move forward on that. With that said, and kind of dovetailing off of what Bonnie said, how can community members support Parks and Recreation to get the resources that they actually need within their city?
Well, elections matter. Park systems are largely paid for bonds and levies. So give an example, our levy that was passed by Portland voters in November 2020 really has stabilized our operating budget, but we continue to have huge major maintenance backlog. As was mentioned earlier, it's about $600 million on our about $2 billion worth of assets we have in parks. In the time that the last bond that was passed for Portland was in 2014, it was about $68 million. PPS during the time 2017 and 2020 passed $2 billion worth of bonds. So it just shows you that like we're underinvesting in our park system from a major maintenance perspective. Like that is, you know, the policy question that is clear and present, and referrals in Portland get done by voters, by getting petition ballots done, or by City of Portland City Council members who refer items to the ballot. So those are our paths forward to really get a substantial amount of new resources to kind of address those needs.
Thank you, Todd. If not, are there any other questions regarding the Deputy Director's report? If not, we're going to move to the working group reports, in which we'll only have Q&A options only. Right, so the Board Affairs Working Group, are there any questions for Casey?
Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. The Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group, David is not here, but are there any questions? Wonderful. It might have to be recorded and David might have to get back to you.
That's fine.
Okay, go ahead and ask the question.
We heard from 2 people today in public comment about Slabtown Park. I noticed in their report that that was something that got pushed to the next agenda, and that it's not on their list of projects that they are tracking right now. I'm just wondering if that committee can at some point let us know if that's an issue that is on their radar, and if that's something that we should expect to hear more about, because we may not make the timeline to take advantage of that opportunity, or if that's something that is coming but just hasn't gotten there yet.
I can say that it is on our radar, and I think the intention is to have that discussion at this month's meeting, and I'm not sure where we'll go from there, but we certainly are aware of it and trying to find out more about it.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
And maybe just quick comment, like we're actively and for many years engaged in the acquisition process of trying to acquire that piece of property. So
go ahead, Randy.
I was just going to push a little harder. I know, you know, those are confidential agreements, but can you give us some confidence that it's a high priority?
For sure, it's high priority. candid, like, we need to try to acquire a piece of property under reasonable terms for like public trust, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what we're working through. Been working through for years.
Yeah.
Scott, it looks like, looks like Lauren might have.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bonnie. And then we'll go to Alana.
Yeah, yes, thank you. As Todd said, we're actively working on it actually as we speak. Both our property management group and our planning group are negotiating with them and have been actually for quite a while now. And the sticking point primarily is that is the cleanup costs. We always do acquisition assessments, you know, what property should be worth. And then we have this other factor of what we would have to actually spend to clean it up, when originally they were going to be the ones cleaning it up. But we'll give you more details, Matt, like you said, at the next meeting. Okay.
And I'll just follow up and say I understand the complications of remediation, and sometimes there are properties that don't work easily because of that. I have a growing concern that as we look at the resources Portlanders need to be able to access parks geographically, we are going to lose access if we don't start looking not just at geographic proximity, but at density also, and especially as we have more very dense neighborhoods going up across our city. Those public open spaces to accommodate both more people, but also more people without individual personal yard space are going to become more and more important. And this property may or may not be worth it. I trust our land use committee to make those decisions. This may or may not be the right location, but I do worry when I hear that a very, very dense neighborhood may lose out on a park opportunity for that reason.
Thank you. Is it correct that the Financial Stability Working Group did not meet?
That's correct.
Thank you, Bonnie. Any questions for the Community Engagement Working Group? Thank you. Moving to Parks Levy Oversight Committee, Casey.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. So I provided a draft of the annual report. It is not comprehensive at this time. I'm actually hoping for some board members, if you were on committees that weren't acknowledged, if you can email me. If you sat on committees during the board's fiscal year from 2022 to 2023. And if you can look over that and let me know if there's any edits, suggestions, or additions that you would like to make, please go ahead and email them to me. Bonnie, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to provide specific comment to you via email. When I scanned it, I will say it was extremely lengthy. And I wonder if there might be a better way, rather than have sort of the summary of the main activities followed by descriptions of the working groups and their individual contributions, to, you know, condense it somehow. I'm happy to provide more direct feedback and suggestions if maybe that's the way to go. I'm concerned because when it's presented to the city council as an annual report, I think we're asked to make it, how long, Todd? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, Casey, do you remember? So I'm concerned about the ability to highlight the key issues in a very lengthy report like that.
Lucky for me, for you, I have training to take really big ideas and get down to 15 minutes. I can work it down to 10. So I hope you have confidence in that. I'm looking for clarification on information that needs to be added to the report to document the work that the board does. So if there's some committees that people have sat on, I don't know what everybody has done. And so if you can make sure that you submit that to me, hopefully by the end of the week, if possible. And then I believe we'll have it to the Board of Affairs Working Group for last looks before submitting it to City Council.
Just so I don't forget, one thing that I wasn't sure if I noticed there is the pretty major lift that Ilana and the nominating committee did in terms of process. And I don't know if that was specifically called out because it is a periodic committee, or I guess it's a subset of the board affairs working group. So I wanted to call that out and give a little kudos there, because we got Matt and Jonathan from that process, and I wanted to note that.
Wonderful. And I hope you can see it as an improvement from prior reports and by including all of the working groups. All right, thank you. Any other additions or questions regarding the annual report? Great, thank you. We're going to move to the city reorganization update.
Right. Nicola, are you out there?
I'm here.
All right. Can you share the slide deck as I open it up here? Great. All right. Real-time information, Chief Administrative Officer Michael Jordan, who's been tasked by City Council to prepare us for our new city organization, which will be for January 1st, 2025. As we'll have new council members, 12 new seats, new mayor, city administrator, lots of change coming at us at City of Portland. And so today, he just sent it out, I think, during this meeting. So we're going to go over with you what we know today. This is a discussion draft of the new organizational structure for the city. And this will be open for public comment this month and employee feedback as well. And then Mike Jordan will be at City Council October 19th. But we'll kind of walk through those processes in the slide deck. We'll get into a little bit of the highlights of how this affects Portland Parks and Recreation and what he's proposed. And then we can talk about, have a discussion or answer your questions. I'll try to answer them as best I can. I'm not Mike Jordan. And then we can talk about how any committee work, or if you want to meet ad hoc as full board or whatever, to make sure that you give your feedback to Mike Jordan or Commissioner Ryan or the City Council prior to their deliberations. So we'll get into this. I think we have about a half hour. Are we doing on time? Are we doing, is that about 8 minutes behind? Are we 8 minutes behind, or am I trying to make up those 8 minutes, Dr. Corbin? Okay.
If, like I said, we decided to stay until 7:30. Okay.
So I'm just gonna,
I don't think we're
my
gonna
time here. So I'm gonna use the half hour because I think we'll need it for discussion. So this is what we thought we'd cover: do a city organization project overview, what the recommendations are for parks, talk a little bit about like there's only so many changes that can be made because of all the technical implementation that goes along with this, and the next steps. Nicola, next slide. So as many of you know, we have 4 city commissioners today and a mayor, and in our future, we will have 12 city commissioners. Those city commissioners will play a legislative role, not both an executive and a legislative role like they do today. So our parks commissioner is both the chief executive of the park system, but also sitting on a legislative body. In our future form of government, we'll actually have 12 legislators that work on policy, they'll approve the budget, and then we'll have more of the traditional, what you would think of like an executive branch that has a mayor, a city administrator, and then all of the city services underneath that. Yeah, so you can ask me questions as we go. If there's anything on the slide you want to refer to, otherwise we can have discussion at the end. Just wanted to highlight the city has made progress, and we do have the 4 defined districts now. So this is a drawing of those districts. There'll be 3 city council members from each one of those 4 districts. So that will make up the 12, and just something for us to think about, both from how we deliver services, but how we do community engagement and the kind of questions and advocacy we might start getting as a city service. You can imagine we're going to have council members that will be very interested in their district, where today all of the council plus the mayor are all citywide representatives. So this is just getting to why are we trying to do this now rather than just wait to January 2025. So the current council is interested in making sure that we have a smooth transition, smooth as possible, to this new form of government, and that we have something that is workable for the new elected officials and for the city government January 1st, 2025. So if we didn't do anything, we'd have a city administrator that would oversee the 26 bureaus that we have today, and they would all be reporting to the city administrator. If you ever try to manage an organization, it might be untenable to try to have 7,000 employees work through 26 bureaus to go to a city administrator. So over the past months, they've kind of come up with this concept of deputy city administrators, and we've been practicing in service areas. So we're currently in the culture and livability service area right now. Parks is in that, City Arts, Portland Children's Levy. We're not reporting to anyone other than a city commissioner today. Dan Ryan's overseeing all of us now. But in the future, the idea is these service areas would be reporting to deputy city administrators. So it's kind of a way to kind of have more of a management structure within the city government. Right. So I think the important piece here is I've been doing some all staff meetings all day long about this because I released the staff about midday today. Is like, what about the bureau director? Who's that person going to report to? Is the deputy city administrator kind of a liaison role or more of a supervisor role? And these are the details that still need to be worked out. But based on what we've heard to date, is the deputy city administrators truly will be kind of supervising and overseeing a collection of bureaus and offices. And that position will report into a city administrator that will report to the mayor. Timing wise, Mike Jordan's recommendation. So this draft, he's calling it a draft for discussion purposes. They released today, and then he'll be bringing something back, and it will be public. We think October 13th, which is a Friday when all council items are posted, and then the hearing would be October 19th. So now we're starting getting into what's related to Portland Parks and Recreation. So earlier this year, there was a council resolution that picked out some of our services that are directly related to parks. So you can see, well, citywide, they're focused on homelessness, community safety, livability, and economic recovery as like big themes for the whole city. Specifically for parks, there are kind of 2 streams of work, and you'll see this showing up in the proposed organizational chart for Mike Jordan. One is around natural resources. So for years, Bureau of Environmental Services, parks, to a lesser extent, water, and Portland Bureau of Transportation. But all 4 of those bureaus were directed through this resolution to work together to see where are the functional alignments between those 4 bureaus. And through that work, it kind of uncovered, and we kind of knew it, but it's all in one place now. There's like over 140 different interagency agreements, MOUs, kind of collaborative, cooperative work that's going on amongst the different teams of those 4 bureaus just around natural resources. So there's kind of this collection of work that has functional alignment. And so there's been a working group between the 4 directors that have been working on that, and that work's ongoing. The other directive was the city has a commitment to improve development permitting. So anytime we're building something new with a building permit. And so there's been an improvement task force that was brought together, and I'll talk more about that when we get to the org chart. Where that relates to us really is our urban forestry team. Some of those team members work on development permits. We have non-development permits for urban forestry, but which means like tree planting. If you want to trim a tree, cut a tree, remove a tree in a non-development, that's another team. But we do have some individuals that work on when buildings are being built, they're removing a tree to work on that. So just to give you a sense of the timeline. So there's been an executive leadership team of bureau directors, deputy directors, chiefs of staff from the council offices that have been working this year, really in earnest late this spring and this summer we've been working in our service areas. So we've been working with Kelly Torres, chief of staff from Dan Ryan, City Arts, Civic Life, Office of Equity. They're all in our current service area, culture and livability. And so we've been working together, brainstorming, giving ideas back to Mike Jordan. That's the reference here to the phase 1 and phase 2 reports. I'll just note at that stage, some of the brainstorming from our service area, there were kind of like, if you thought about where would parks fit in this future of kind of service areas, we kind of had 2 scenarios as kind of drafts. One was cultural livability, kind of hangs together nicely. There's a lot of synergy between city arts and our arts and culture program, for instance, or Children's Levy, for instance, does a lot of grants to organizations that are some organizations that we give grants to as well for similar services. So that was kind of one idea. And another one was public works. So because of the natural resource overlap, what we do with trees, and we manage a lot of public infrastructure, that Portland Bureau of Transportation, Bureau of Environmental Services, Water Bureau, and Parks really do. We have asset management programs, we do public contracting, there's a lot of overlap there. So that would be another kind of area of possibility. So that's what came out of our phase 2 work that Mike considered. And then he's releasing his draft in September. And as I mentioned, it will go out in October. So those were the kind of 2 big ideas, if you will, that were kind of seated with Mike for his consideration. So this gets to, we'll get to the citywide org chart. Hopefully this is working for you. So you can see the whole thing, but maybe just pick off what's directly related to parks before we look at the whole org chart. So first, just to confirm, we're going to look at an org chart with deputy city administrators, with bureau offices and clusters and service areas. The city administrator office is going to have some new key functions that we'll talk about when we look at the org chart. That in Director Jordan's draft for discussion is what he's sharing as now. He has PP&R in a public works service area with transportation, Bureau of Environmental Services, and water. He's also introduced the concept of, for consideration, a natural resource management, new management unit within the public works service area. So kind of a nod to this ongoing work of the 4 bureaus, that we've got these 140 agreements already. Like, would it make more sense to create a new management unit? So all 4 of those current bureaus create a 5th management unit, and those that could be under one team. So that's a concept that he put in there. Relating to the permitting, there was a council action just at the end of August where they gave even more direction, saying they want an independent development permitting team. Mike has placed that team in the Community and Economic Development Service area, which is the same area that the Bureau of Development Services is in Prosper, Portland. However, they want it independent. So the direction from council right now is that some collection of people and services that give the permits for development in Portland will be under one manager, and they're not calling it an office, but a team that will be separate. And it's showing up in Mike's proposal, reporting to the deputy city administrator. We'll see that on the org chart. City Arts, Director Jordan recognized kind of the alignment with Portland Parks and Recreation. So because his thinking was we're going to bring it, put it in Public Works, that City Arts moved with Parks to Public Works. And I'll highlight this on the org chart, but advisory boards and councils, I know this group would be interested in that, is a highlighted function for the city administrator's office about having a lead around community engagement and advisory boards. Right now, that's in Civic Life technically for the city. While we have a relationship as a working board just through Parks, we have over 100 advisory boards and councils in the city, and the responsible entity right now is Civic Life. In the new organizational proposal, Civic Life is kind of broken up, and those services are put either in the city administrator's office or in other places in the organizational chart. So you won't see Civic Life on the proposed organizational chart. All right, and I think a lot of that will be easier once you see it too, depending on what kind of learner you are. For some people that might be good.
Can I jump in really quickly?
Yes.
Will the board be able to have access to this?
Yes.
These slides?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's a 30-minute video that Mike did explaining the org chart. There's a lot of different resources that they've just released this evening. So
watch out for that.
This is just an opening.
We'll look out for it.
This might be obvious when we see the chart, but is City Arts program becoming part of Parks and Rec, or is it a sixth entity within?
It's listed separate right now.
Got it.
And that level of detail isn't really spelled out. It's kind of a work in progress. They're really trying to get what are the clusters. Thank you, Nicola. Perfect. So maybe if you just scroll down a little bit so that people can see Public Works. There we go. Yeah. So you can see the deputy city administrator and the colors. So those are the service areas. We have 5 today. His proposal is showing 5. There's nothing magic about that. It could be 6, could be 7, right? But he chose 5. Public Works, you can see Arts is listed separate there. And then you'll see Natural Resources with 2 asterisks next to it. 1 asterisk on the chart, and you'll see this when you look at it on your own, means it's new. It's not a standalone kind of entity now. And 2 means it's like a work in progress. Like there's a work team that's kind of thinking about this, working on it. So, you know, it's a hypothetical idea still. The stuff where you see 1 asterisk, like the equity officer, that's something that I think Mike's leaning into even more than the ones with 2. And he's saying like, look, equity is something we want to lead with as a city. It's important to have that type of leadership reporting directly to the city administrator. So there's a new equity officer. I will note though, that is not, it's an open question about the functions and services of the Office of Equity and Human Rights. There's about 20 people actually that work there, provide a variety of different services to the city. And so it's an open question of like, how many people is that really to provide that leadership? And then the assumption is that the bureaus, or at least the service areas, would continue to have equity and inclusion teams because we rely on that expertise and support to make sure we provide great services.
I have a question. Oh, wait 1 second.
Yeah.
Can we make sure that we put our you see that?
Yes.
Thank you. So what I have is Chris, Sue-Lin, and then Randy. Go ahead, Chris.
And you might not have the details on this yet, but I see that asset management has 1 asterisk, which means it's a new kind of aspect under city operations. And given the conversation and public comment tonight and the backlog that we have in asset development infrastructure, that over 600 million just within the Parks and Recreation Department, does this mean that all asset oversight and development in the backlog would then be within this new portion of asset management within city operations from all of the bureaus for this asset management? Or am I reading too much into this chart?
So I'd say a couple of caveats first. This is a discussion draft, right, that Mike Jordan has shared. My commentary is not Mike's commentary. And so I'm trying to read into this as much as my participation. I think the answer is no.
Okay.
I think there's certain services like human resources, accounting, budgeting, and asset management is being recognized in that same way, that are critical leadership roles in the city where we need someone to set our policies, set the expectations that every bureau in office should be meeting. So you think of a smaller team here that is kind of setting that standard, because we have uneven kind of service provision of asset management across the different bureaus. Some bureaus take it very seriously. The Water Bureau does actually a great job. They're one of the leaders doing asset management. We're like in the middle. We do pretty good. And there's some bureaus that are not doing so good. And so it's really to level up everyone to the same level.
That was actually really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you could scroll. Oh, go ahead.
You might have just touched a little bit on that. You have a diagram earlier. You have the 26 bureaus.
Right.
1 point, and then you regroup, right?
Right.
Does this reflect that level of basically the same? It's almost like the same amount of people. We're just organizing them a little bit differently. So then the process of decision making filter through should be faster, easier, clearer, less clunky, or are we creating more people going through more process of decision making, the same pool of resource?
Right.
Are we, you know, of course, we all want to make sure everything goes smoothly and simplify and clearer, but it just looks very rich in terms of all these little boxes now as its own micro system.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's two concepts you're on them that this is reflecting from a management kind of perspective. Is we do have a unified executive leader in the city administrator and the mayor. At the end of the day, only their delegated authorities, and we haven't gone through the delegated authority process and code updates, but at its extreme, we're all working for the city administrator, everyone on that sheet. At the end of the day, there's a disagreement, we're doing what the city administrator says, like at its extreme, right? So in that way, you can have a very focused kind of leadership, strategic direction, right? Move faster, maybe more efficient. But the reality is we're an organization where there's like technical and subject matter expertise deeper into the organization that are going to need to get delegated authority to direct bureau directors, to give guidance, maybe even direct deputy city administrators. And let's go back to asset management. They're going to set a standard for what the management of the whole city is going to have to do around asset management. And if folks aren't following it, maybe the consequences end up going up to the city administrator and people need to change their jobs or something. But like the authorities will, I think, are going to have to be delegated. Maybe HR is the HR director is still going to be our expert around our administrative rules and best practice around HR. And they will hold all of us as managers to account to make sure we follow those. So there is some matrix management that goes on top of this that you can't get away from the way we're structured. Does that answer your question?
For now.
Yeah. And the org chart is just one piece, right? So to run an organization, delegated authorities, how much money in each one of these, and people, there's a lot of different things, the service level standards. There's a lot of things that will go into deciding whether this is actually resulting in better service, more equitable service and everything than an org chart alone won't solve. Can you just go down to the next, scroll down?
Yeah. Is that?
No, I just wanted to make sure folks saw this, and I can go back to the other one if you. So this is just getting into the city administrator's office, so you can see, and I referenced the advisory boards and councils. So in community relations, under an assistant city administrator, that is where what currently is in civic life, the advisory boards and councils, and setting that policy direction. And you can see there's a variety of other engagement, community relations, services that are in that group. So we can go back to the other one if you'd like. I just wanted you to see that.
I'm sorry, where is it at?
There
it is.
The third
Okay.
one down.
Okay, got it,
Yeah.
got it. Okay. Yeah, my question's, and I don't know if it, got down to the grain of, the Portland Parks Foundation, but I'm really curious, where do you think public-private partnerships is going to land? Is it going to be in Portland Solutions under the mayor, or is it going to be under special projects and opportunities? And city operations.
I don't know. Todd.
Yeah.
Thanks. That public-private partnership is how you do some of your work, not a place where it's just in one place. And I think for some of us as in the organization, Prosper Portland, Portland Parks and Recreation, DES does actually a lot of partnerships. PBOT does a lot of partnerships. Like that needs to be in lots of different places around. And I think maybe the question to think harder about, which, just like asset management made it on there, is there a subject matter expert lead or something, in the city of Portland that is just thinking about public-private partnerships every day they wake up and that's all they do? That's maybe not on there right now. And so,
yeah, what do you know what Portland Solutions is?
So Portland Solutions, I do. I can pull up some of these. I do need to pull up my notes to get it right. So today we have the Joint Office of Homelessness and a variety of different services that is to, a lot of times it's public spaces or public right of way where we're doing graffiti or
it's a kind of chemo now.
Yeah,
okay.
Which is the Environmental Management Office. It's run out of the mayor's office, and I will pull it up just so I can read what they said. Portland Solution Group is to respond to community livability concerns in the 4 new districts, including those managed through emergency declarations and 90-day resets. Those have been largely led by current mayor, who's had a variety of different emergency declarations, oftentimes about care for public spaces or public right-of-way. The main focus of Portland Solutions is to provide place-based solutions for houselessness, community livability, and neighborhood priorities with a citywide need. And so that group has the Joint Office of Homelessness Services and the Safe Rest Villages, a lot of those services, and they have it.
I think Alana said it's like on the next page. It's noted.
You want to scroll down, Nicola? Yeah.
Oh, there. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I missed that.
So I have a question regarding two questions. Are there any board members that have questions that are online that we need to?
And maybe I can.
We have
a
people
couple,
that just raised their hand.
And we've got a couple more slides. If people don't have specific questions about the chart, but more about the process before. But does anyone?
Are those board member hands? I just want to make sure.
I have Casey, John.
Casey or Jonathan, is it about the chart or the process? Because I've got some more information to share about the process.
I had one for
process,
both.
so I can wait.
Okay. Casey, you want to do the chart one?
Sure. So this might be a little bit of variation what Sue Ann was talking about before, but I'm sure someone is watching from. What I'm concerned about is the cost of additional administration. So I'm wondering if someone is watching from, say, like assistant director up, higher up than that, the number of people that are going to be added on as part of this process and what the cost differential is going to be. That's not a parks real question, but I'm concerned about more money being paid for administration as opposed to, things that need repairing.
Right. Yeah, so good question. These are the kind of comments and suggestions or questions maybe you would like to get in to Director Jordan. It's an open question about the allocation of existing personnel and resources to adapt to this org chart too. So that's an open discussion.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Todd.
I have.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sue. Thank you. Just one more observation here. Beautiful chart, but a lot of reality situations are never that so clear cut. So you're gonna have a situation where there are 3 of these boxes all saying that we should have a say on that, right? That's where the muddled up situation. Who is going to be deciding on whether or not one particular kind of foggy subject should lean into one of these boxes very clearly? That's where the so-called dispute is going to the territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of these issues could also result on funding. It's like who's going to get funding to do what? And when someone has certain situation, they may see we want to take on that. And when everything is beautiful and clear cut, that's great. But the thing is, it's never really that simple.
Right.
And I'm hoping that as things are evolve and clarify further, that's where there's an overlay type of decision-making structure that is not going to be either something's going to fall through the crack between the boxes, or people are going to be sort of jockeying, trying to make sure that that's mine and that's not yours.
Right.
And I'm hoping there's more Venn diagrams rather than very clear-cut boxes. I guess eventually will there become a silo situation? And this is where the big question is, are we creating more silos, and how do you make sure that that doesn't happen?
Those are great comments.
It remains to be seen.
That's a comment.
Yeah, that's great.
No
Yeah,
questions.
that's great.
Thank you, Selena.
Yeah, that's great.
I have what I think is a quick question. Has based on the fact that we have one commissioner over Parks and Rec, and we're going to have 3 commissioners per these new districts, is there going to be one commissioner that is going to be committed to different bureaus in each district? Or are we expecting all 12 of them to possibly be in conversation with the bureaus? Do we understand
as like it's structured, there's no official liaison role of council members to service areas or bureaus. We've had some kind of information sessions with other cities that have these forms of government. You've all come from different cities, so you've probably seen this play out about that individual council members really don't have maybe authority or purview to actually go to city bureaus. They actually need to work through the city administrator's office to have access to the executive side of the city government, unless there's like a majority on the council that wants to pursue something together. And that can, examples that we had from other cities and counties was even just for information gathering. That today we're very responsive to individual council members, of what the information they want, when they want it. And I think they'll be coordinated more through the city administrator's office.
Thank you. Just to.
All right, should we
probably
can take
5 more minutes?
Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
So a lot of technical implementation that goes along with this that will start after in earnest after October 19th, when we know what the changes we're trying to make. But you can imagine there's a lot of HR, finance, technology, enterprise systems that need to be developed. So we've already assigned accounting staff, workforce staff, budget staff, because the idea is when we come out of October 19th, with council has some kind of direction, we're building the budget for FY 24-25 in this new structure. So all of Portland Parks and Recreation coding needs to be redone, need to reassign everything within the new service area, whatever that may be. So there's just a lot of technical work on the back end. So you can't make too many changes. Like this is almost going to break us, what you see there, and there's not that many small changes, honestly. And so if we get to too finite a level and want to move this small team to that place, and we do 100 of those, we'll break the technical side of this project. Like that. Next slide. So I think this gets to some of the earlier questions about like, what are we trying to do with this organizational structure? And based on community feedback over the last couple of years, the transition team has had a variety of surveys and focus groups and interactions, collected public comment. And so these are some of the community outcomes that Mike Jordan's team's been keeping in mind about what the new organizational chart and ultimately the services should be able to deliver. Go to the next slide. So September 27th, Mike Jordan's team's having a community information session. He'll be there, but there's also a video that they just posted. We'll send you all that information. You'll have all this information we talked about and more. We should talk quickly with the time we have about how you'd like to do working groups, or you can get back to us. We're happy to help staff those or show up and do some version of this again as you have more information. I know the October 10th board meeting might be a nice place to talk about it again, but to be honest, it's a little too late for advocacy if you're trying to influence the outcome. And so by the end of September really is when you need to get, they told staff the September 29th is the last date they're going to be accepting comments from staff. And so it might be the same for community members. You can always send more, and you can always reach out to council members or Commissioner Ryan after that, but we're trying to influence whatever Mike Jordan's doing and proposing for the 19th, probably by the end of the month is the timeline.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the working group chairs if you can put some space for this conversation on your agendas and then report back into the Board Affairs Working Group so we can make sure that we can take action based on the full board being in conversation. Alana, go ahead.
Two things, if you don't mind. First is a question for Todd. Do you have a sense, does anybody have a sense yet of when the shift to these new groups, assuming that they're approved as they stand, will happen? When will parks no longer be in an arts group, but instead in a resource-based group with presumably a new commissioner in the interim until we have our new commission structure, things like that?
Yeah, there's a variety of different ways that could go, but the requested budget that's due in January, they want to load it in for that. That would be effective July 1st. So in theory, possibly this coming July, which is that FY 24-25 fiscal year, will be in the structure that we will be ready for the new form of government. But how they deal with, you know, does the current commissioner or does the mayor pull back all the bureaus? That's been done before, where the mayor actually oversees all the bureaus. Like that's all up in the air. Just one other like suggestion, maybe it's Dr. Corbin, is maybe some type of liaison relationship with Commissioner Ryan's office during this next couple of weeks. I don't know if that's committee chair or it's you, but or even the next month. There's just going to be a lot. I think there's going to be a lot in play from a lot of different stakeholder groups. You can imagine Portland Utility Board, environmental advocates, art advocates, like everyone's going to have their own opinion. And ultimately it's going to come down to city council vote on the 19th. So what three of them really think is the best path forward is what's we're going to move forward. So I think having someone here, we can help with that, but like having a single point of contact lead would be helpful, I think.
conversation. We'll get back to you. We'll talk.
Yeah, sounds good.
And we'll talk.
But yeah, my second question is just for you, Dr. Corbin. Do you need a vote of the board to empower the Board of Affairs Working Group to move forward with advocacy on the board's behalf, since we'll need to do, if we want to do anything, we'll need to do it before the next board meeting.
Right. So I would love to hear how the working groups think what advocacy will look like, or how they would like to come up with that. Have the chairs report what the working groups would like to see during the Board of Affairs Working Group. And from that point, we can move forward. Might be something that we have to go online to move forward to get it in on time. So I would love to hear from the board. And hopefully through this process, we can move swiftly and do the advocacy work that everybody can get behind. That makes sense? Okay. This is not a dictatorship, right? And as always, you are free to email me if you have any thoughts or comments. Alana and I meet every other week on Mondays, and so we definitely discuss these issues and making sure that we can support the board's wants and needs as this very interesting process continues to unfold.
Question.
Right?
No,
we have two hands, Matt and Jonathan. So Matt and Jonathan, please. Order.
Thanks, Dr. Corbin. Todd, thank you for distilling all that in such rapid, short order. Sounds like a long day for you. I'm curious, I have 3 questions. One, I'm curious if any park staff see any obvious challenges with the proposal. You don't feel like you had enough time to digest that, or don't feel like it's an appropriate venue to share that, that's appropriate. Understand that. I'm curious on the new administration. So if I'm a member of the public, am I going to continue to interact with agencies the same way, or am I going to sort of start with these new administrators, if you know? And then lastly, on this sort of reveals a bit of my ignorance, but on the Office of Civic Life, I don't think they really have a lot to do with this board. If that's accurate, is that they're going to then kind of flow through to the new sort of body that would also sort of quote unquote have oversight of the advisory board? Thanks.
Sure, I can do it in reverse order. So the Civic Life kind of sets our standard citywide, although it's an uneven one, about advisory boards. So for instance, in the recruitment process, they set up guidance around how we should recruit new board members. This is like one example. And so, in the future, it's still an open question about, how the different advisory boards, like the Parks Board or the Utility Board, and how those will function, in the future. That's just like still open. The status quo is the starting point that continue to advise the Bureau. Your second question, I'm not going to answer the first one. The second one, what was it again? Sorry, should take notes.
Yeah, just curious, if I'm a member of the public and I want to reach parks, am I reaching out to this new administrative level, or just sort of continuing to liaise with the Bureau?
Right. I think the city's very large, right? Multi-billion-dollar organization, lots of programs and services. I think there's a recognition we'll still have community engagement within the service areas and even within the bureaus. We do a lot of community engagement interactions. And so I think it depends how you want to interact. However, we are trying to improve kind of single points of contact. Like 311 is a growing, relied upon service by all bureaus, of where you should be able to call 311, ask a question, and they can put you to the right place within the city. So there are kind of these underpinning kind of infrastructure pieces, access points that hopefully over time with a better coordinated city, it's easier for a community that normally doesn't interact with city government to have access. I don't know. I kind of answered your question, but trying. Jonathan?
Hey, yeah, thanks Todd and Nicola for presenting this and talking through it. And I have a question that maybe is answered elsewhere, but it doesn't seem clear to me, but it's kind of with this, obviously the structure is being built. And there's going to be a new leadership team. What does the transition of that look like and the overlap? Like with the, obviously next November, there's going to be election. That's going to give us a new city council, a mayor, then beginning in January. But I feel like, are these leadership, the city administrator and the deputy administrator roles, is there a transitional plan for those, or
there hasn't been one
with the hiring of those, or does that not come until January 2025, or is there, overlap there with that, especially the city administrator role?
Yeah, other than building it into the requested budget effective July 1 in 2024, there hasn't been any more communication about trying to fill those roles, or however, Mike Jordan's been, noting that it'll be sometime later in 2025 after you would have a mayor and a hiring process for a city administrator before you'd have that permanent city administrator in that seat. So that's kind of where we are today.
So it could be a long look out to seeing who and how those roles come about. Is there plans like from the Parks End on how to transition that and kind of that bridge from January 2025 to having the leadership team in place?
Well, for a long time, we've managed an independent bureau that reported to a city administrator. And if we end up reporting to a deputy city administrator, I think we can handle that. So yeah, for a lot of our staff, this is not a big change. Where the change is really in the management structure and maybe some of the management positions, myself, a director, others, like maybe that's where we see more of the change, coming at us. But for most staff, the day-to-day work isn't going to change much.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Rich, unfortunately, we won't be able to bring your comment or question in until the end of the meeting. We have another report to do. So we're going to conclude this part. Thank you, Todd. And again, look out for all this information that's going to be coming our way to study it. But Rich, I do have you down for a comment later at the end of the meeting, along with one more commenter. So thank you for that. We're going to move to the Sustainable Future and Capital Projects update, which is both you again, Todd. And it looks like we have you down for 15 minutes.
I've got strong partners here. Sarah and Lauren are here. Sarah, would you like to kick it off?
Sure. Thanks very much, Todd. So hello. And for those of you that I haven't met yet, I'm Sarah Huggins. I'm our Bureau's Sustainable Future Program Manager. And then with me tonight is Lauren McGuire, our Asset and Development Division Manager. If you wouldn't mind, Michelle, just kind of going back to slide 2 to get us started here.
Sorry.
Oh, that's great. You can advance to slide 2. So we're here tonight with an informational update, and we're going to share some information about our current funding position, our capital maintenance backlog, our assets that are really at highest risk of closure in our system, a little bit about our capital major maintenance prioritization process, and then we'll have some time to talk about next steps. And I also want to flag that included in your board packet is a briefing memo for this item as well. Next slide, please. Great, so the Sustainable Future Program really has been working in earnest since 2019 to support service levels with appropriate funding levels. During that time, we've given periodic updates to the Parks Board as we move forward, and the last update I looked back, looks like that we gave was in March of this year. So I'm going to go over some of this content might be familiar to those of you who have heard it before, so maybe it's a refresh and it might be new for others. Some of the early steps of the program included creating an alternative funding task force. So this was during the summer and the fall of 2019. It was a community task force that the Bureau convened to provide advice and consultation on a variety of alternative funding options. In November of 2019, City Council held a public Sustainable Future work session, where City Council reviewed Portland Parks and Recreation's financial and service level forecasts and discussed potential alternative funding options. At that work session, the Bureau received support to pursue additional funding to change course and get the Bureau on track to fulfill service levels. Specifically in that work session, City Council encouraged the Bureau to continue pursuing a variety of options, including an income tax, a temporary levy, formation of a special district, capital bonds, and a food and beverage tax. In early 2020, the Bureau was advancing work on a number of these options, but COVID impacted both our services and our Bureau finances. We, given some pretty immediate operating funding gaps, at that time, the Bureau pulled both a bond, which could address capital maintenance needs, and also a temporary levy, which could address our operational needs. We also pulled the idea of both of those two things together on the same ballot. And what we saw at the time was highest polling support for an operating levy on its own. And that's what City Council referred to the ballot and what Portland voters approved in November of 2020. The 2020 voter approved 5-year parks levy allowed the Bureau to avoid devastating service cuts and make progress on operating services. But it is a temporary funding solution, and it didn't solve all of the Bureau's long-term ongoing financial needs. So to continue advancing and developing funding options, Director Long convened a ballot initiative task force in the summer of 2022. And that group met 3 times between July and September to review the Bureau's funding position and again to advise on a number of funding options and next steps. The task force included 12 members of the community, including Parks Board members. Thank you for those in the room who participated. All members of the task force suggested that a general obligation bond should be considered as a near-term step, and a majority of members thought that renewal of the temporary local option levy and consideration of a park and recreation special district should also be considered in the near term, with a few members seeing these as sort of longer term options. If you could go to the next slide. So this is a chart showing sort of our current funding position as of fiscal year 22-23. As a Bureau, we're working towards achieving a sustained annual funding level of approximately $235 million to deliver critical community services. More, if we look at more capital growth resources for faster expansion of the system to address inequities, or adding new services like street tree maintenance, either as a citywide or a more targeted or even a pilot approach. So I'm going to walk through these starting from the top. For sustained operations, with the voter-approved 2020 Parks Local Option Levy, our operational service levels are adequately funded through 2025. But we will need to renew the Parks Levy if we don't want to see significant operational service declines. And again, the Parks Levy is providing about 1/3 of our Bureau's operational funding today. Capital maintenance. The Bureau's capital maintenance picture continues to decline, with a capital maintenance backlog that's grown to over $600 million. And as a city, we're still on track to close 1 in 5 park assets over the next 15 years. We currently receive an ongoing commitment of just under $5 million annually from the general fund for capital maintenance. And based on a portfolio of our size, about $55 million more is needed annually to reach an industry good practice level of investment, and to get to a point where we're actually doing preventative maintenance and preventing unplanned asset closures. So this capital maintenance is where we're really going to focus today's update. And in the following slides, Lauren is going to share a more detailed picture of what's that lack of funding is starting to look like for our park system. So capital growth, this is largely anticipated to be covered by future forecasted SDC revenues, system development charge revenues, accompanied by grants and donations. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, with additional resources, we could make faster progress filling in the equity gaps. And for example, bring East Portland up to match Portland's average for walkability to a park or natural area. We also have ideas that come up from time to time of additional services that the park system doesn't offer today, but that could provide a large benefit for the community. And one of those that has been discussed is the idea of the city taking on street tree maintenance. We did sort of an estimate with a consultant of what that would roughly cost if we were to do it on a citywide scale, and that estimate was about $20 million. We know that the cost of maintaining street trees is a barrier for lower income households adding street trees. So we also, you know, in addition to kind of this citywide approach, we could explore a pilot project, bringing street tree maintenance online in kind of a more targeted way, specifically the idea of utilizing an equity lens and really focusing on those lowest canopy areas in our city. Yeah, for this band, we're also continuing to look at sort of additional funding options as well, particular to this work. So I've kind of put a red box around it to help kind of focus us tonight, but capital maintenance really is what we see as the largest currently unfunded need for the park system. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to share what that means for the assets that serve our community.
Thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, we're significantly underfunded for capital maintenance for a park system of our size. By capital maintenance, we mean larger maintenance projects to fix or repair or replace any of our assets that are needing it, and that is capitalizable. As Sarah said, we have approximately $600 million in major maintenance projects that should be completed to repair or renovate our system's assets. So we should be targeting about 3% of our park system's portfolio value to maintain our park's assets. Our portfolio is valued, as Todd said earlier tonight, at approximately $2 billion. So therefore, we should be spending, as Sarah said, $60 million, and we receive less than $5 million annually. So if you want to go to the next slide, Michelle, this is pretty dramatic depiction that shows what would happen to the capital major maintenance backlog if we were investing in our park system like we should be to maintain a system in good condition. That's the blue line at the bottom showing spending about $60 million per year. And then what is actually happening, which is the red line, capital major maintenance backlog with the meager investments that we have, about $5 million per year. Next slide. The worsening condition of our parks asset has resulted in service impacts throughout our park system, as we all know. The slide indicates some examples of closures and service impacts in our parks today due to asset condition. So Columbia Pool, we closed. The park lighting in 12 of our parks we're replacing, many of which we've already taken out. The Leif Erikson Forest Park fire lane at milepost 62 is totally blocking that fire lane area. So fire could be access could be an issue. The Rose Garden restroom during the Rose Festival had the plumbing break. The 4T Trail had a landslide and failed. They just continue on and on. We had a trail bridge at Colwood Natural Area that we had to demolish. Grant Field, you heard all about the turf field today. Ed Benedict play structure, we had to close. Firehouse Theater, we've had to close. Portland Children's Museum, the Lair Hill Building, and the Montevilla Shelter are all just some recent examples of parks asset closures that we've had recently. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the Montevilla Shelter demolition. The closures can also be permanent reductions in service. Here's a photo of the demolition that we did, and we're not replacing it at this time. And so we had to demolish it because it was unsafe for the community to use. Next slide. This is a map, which is a snapshot in our in time of our assets that have deteriorated. So orange is poor, an asset that's in poor condition. Red is an asset that's in very poor condition throughout our park system. You can see they're scattered throughout. And then in the following slides, we're going to share some details about those assets that we believe are in the worst condition and therefore at the greatest risk of closure if we can't fund repairs or replacements in the future. Next slide. This is a list of forecasted near-term closures. They were established by our asset management staff performing assessments on those assets. They look at them and rate them on which are most likely to fail, which if they have a 5, that's most likely to fail. They use assessments based on an international standard and comprehensive criteria. You can see in the first two asset categories that we have some significant potential closures of community center and arts and culture center facilities, many of which we often use for our community in need during heat events or cooling events. Additionally, our building heating and cooling systems themselves and the electrical systems have issues and are in need of substantial repairs and replacements in order to keep our buildings functioning. About 2/3 of our inventory mechanical equipment is beyond its normal expected service life. So that not only increases the likelihood of a pretty impactful failure on the system's part, but it also means our maintenance staff spend a lot of extra time just maintaining the equipment and trying to keep it operational. One thing you won't see on here is Mount Scott that was brought up earlier tonight. It's not listed because thankfully we have a little silver lining. We have $34.5 million in funds for the renovation of that project and is scheduled to start later this year. Next slide. Here's a slide list of other building issues and renovations that are needed, like roof replacements that could cause building or facility closures. Next slide. This slide shows many of our restrooms and playgrounds that could close in the near term due to mechanical failures, safety issues, or repair and replacement issues. It's a pretty formidable list. As you can see, there's like 10 restrooms and 25 playgrounds needing assistance of some sort. Next slide. This is talking about the many courts that are in need of repair and total replacement. We also heard that tonight from one of our community members. Also noted here are sports fields that are in need of repair and replacement. Again, we heard a lot about Grant Field today. The bottom line is that we've neglected investment in our aging infrastructure, although Parks has tried many times to get additional funding. And as a result, our system's not in good condition. And without this additional investment, we are going to lose assets in the next 15 years. Next slide, please. While our biggest issue with our capital major maintenance is a significant underfunding, I do want to share a little bit about the process that we use to prioritize our projects with the funding that we do have. We inform annual discussions on how to spend the resources that we do have for capital major maintenance by calculating first an initial prioritization score. And we do that by looking at equity. We look at who's being served and we calculate based on the service area equity score within a half mile of a park or asset. We use census data on whether the service area includes Portlanders that are diverse, so Indigenous, Black, and people of color populations, populations of youth under 18, and households experiencing poverty, as noted by the census. Then we assess how likely it is to fail. So that's the equity score. The second one is the likelihood of failure score that I talked about earlier, which is based on its condition and asset inspections. And finally, the third category is the consequence of failure. So once we think something's going to fail, then we look at what is the criticality index. So what happens if a whole asset fails? What happens to the level of service in the area? Are there safety concerns? Are there financial implications? And we times those all together. 5 is the maximum score they can get on each. So the maximum score for the 3 is 125 total. When we're considering major maintenance projects, in addition to considering equity, likelihood, and failure and consequence of failure, we also try to use an opportunistic approach to maximizing available resources if we can. If we have additional funding from some other source, we might go ahead and then fix that particular asset. For the fiscal year 24-25 SDC and major maintenance capital project selection process, we'll be amending it this year because there are limited resources available to allocate. PP&R has fewer SDC funds for this fiscal year 24-25 because the SDC contingency of 10 million has to be replenished. We used that last year on projects. The North Portland Aquatic Center has a significant funding gap as well. And then our existing SDC funded and major maintenance funded projects continue to experience significant cost increases due to inflation. Finally, the major maintenance fund is limited because we're spending some of it on the light pole safety project. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to Sarah to talk about our next steps.
Michelle.
Thank you very much, Lauren.
Sarah, if we can pause the presentation for a minute, just to realize that we're almost at 7 o'clock. And then just really quickly, I want to take this time to thank Randy Gregg. He is stepping down from the Portland Parks Foundation as executive director, and I want to thank him and acknowledge him for his service to Parks and Rec and his work that he has done for the city of Portland. So thank you so much. I wanted to make sure we recognize and just wanted to recognize that we really appreciate you, and we hope to see you in, you know, other ways that you're going to be contributing to the city.
Hope to keep doing that. And I just want to say Jessica Green, who's been really my almost co-director, is, you know, taking the helm. She has a great Friends and Allies Summit coming up in October that you all should look at, and she'll do a great job, and she'll be your liaison.
Thank you. You'll be missed, and we're also looking forward to speaking with her.
Great, thanks.
Just really quickly, did you want to say?
Yeah, I just, you know, I know we're short on time, but Randy, the way that the foundation has worked with Parks and with the Parks Board, as I understand it, has really changed under your leadership a lot, and the involvement of the foundation and thinking about some of these issues that we're hearing about right now and how the city can step up in different ways to help us address making sure that we have the infrastructure we need in our communities has really changed. And we've seen just in the last couple of years what you've done with the celebrations in the park blocks that I know you have had a huge hand in making happen. And the work of the foundation has been so important, and its continued evolution has been so important as we think about the continued evolution of parks. So I really want to thank you, not just for what the foundation has done generally, but for your personal leadership in that, and really making sure that, that the foundation is helping us to create such an incredible vision for parks in our city.
Thanks, I'm really touched. Thank you.
Any other well-wishers out there on the interwebs? Just really quickly, I just want to make sure that I give everybody time and space. Just to let you know, there's been a couple emails and people poking me to make sure that we recognize you. So thank you so much. Bonnie, did you have a question or a comment? Or?
I have a question. I mean, I echo 100% what Ilana just said. I mean, I've admired your work even prior to you joining the foundation. I was so delighted when you were named the new foundation director. I actually did have a question with respect to but I think it's also really quite an amazing serendipitous coincidence that I noticed that many of the assets that Lauren identified as at high risk of failure are assets for which we have other nonprofit sort of partners, and also with the grant bull failure and the partnership that we have with PPS and all its pros and cons that Todd outlined. I'm interested to sort of know, is there a way that we can better leverage this? And I'm thinking particularly when I was looking at the list of assets at risk of high failure, you know, the Community Music Center, the Lawn Sioux Garden, I can't remember what all was on your list, Lauren, but those kinds of, you know, they have independent nonprofits that are working in conjunction with the Bureau to provide those services and to maintain those really positive assets for the community. Is there a way that we can better leverage those partnerships as well as those with PPS and other entities like that, that we can help dig ourselves out of this $600 million hole that we're in? It just got me thinking, and just serendipitously, we're talking about Randy's, you know, really critical role with the foundation. But that might be part of it too.
I think we definitely can do that. Dylan Paul is working daily with the partners on trying to redefine our partnerships with them and the agreements. He's working through a lot of those agreements now and trying to see how we can best support them and they can best support us. But a lot more to come on that. But that's a great point, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we can resume the presentation. My apologies for jumping in, but it was for a wonderful reason. I understand that not everybody can stay past 7:05. So thank you for bearing with us. So I believe, is it back to Sarah?
Yes, and Michelle, if you wouldn't mind just pulling up that next step slides one more time.
Sorry, Michelle.
I will be brief. So next slide, if you don't mind. So we will be back to share updates as we continue the work of refining and updating the capital backlog and the forecasts and information about kind of what the highest risk assets are and their potential service impacts. We'll also be back to share how we're communicating these potential impacts with our broader community. I think we heard a little bit this evening about how communication really is key. And then we're also continuing to have conversations with our commissioner, Commissioner Ryan, about both the state of park assets. So he's well informed about kind of the nature of the information we're sharing with you tonight, and also the next steps that he would like to see for the Sustainable Future program to take to really support potential solutions. So we will continue to keep you informed as these conversations move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for flowing with us this evening. Are there any questions from the board?
We have time for questions.
Yes. Okay. Casey, then Ali.
Okay, yes, and Sarah, I'm just wondering, is there a possibility with the government transition that there is a potential opportunity for us to at least lay the groundwork for getting more assets to come over to parks? I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity there.
I think there's probably lots of opportunities, but I'm wondering if you can clarify what you're meaning by more assets coming over to parks.
Well, more of the budget.
I thought you meant like more buildings or something.
No. I'm talking about money. And it could be, the easiest thing is advocacy. I mean, if there's some way that we can start an advocacy program where we're starting to tell everybody as a new manager comes in, look, parks is one of the most wonderful things in Portland. We really need more money to make it work. I just don't know where the opportunity is there.
Resounding yes. I think with current council and I think with future council, that is a great role for the Parks Board.
And I guess I'll just add on to that. That is more and more going to be the role of elected officials. That in our current form of government, we have bureaus that report directly to elected officials, and that will not be the case in the future. And so elections are going to matter. And the people that are on the 12 people on council and the mayor are going to set the policy direction and the resource allocation for the city. And I don't know if it's, what the term is for it is, for some of us that work in government that love our mission so much, we're like bureaucrats and advocates. That will become less and less the case, I think, in the future form of government. And elected officials are more and more going to have the control about the future direction of the city. So I think those elections are going to be really important.
Thank you. Ali.
Yeah, thanks, Corbin. Wondering in the sort of equity assessment part that you were outlining, if disability and accessibility is factored in at all. I know truly wonderful accessible parks are sadly fewer and far between in Portland, especially ones that have really great natural resources. It tends to be sort of more flat just open spaces that tend to just be fields, which, you know, no hate towards fields, but it is nice to not to actually have some good. And I know a lot of the maintenance backlog is tied to ADA issues, which Parks is full of, but I'm wondering if disability is factored in at all. I didn't hear it mentioned, but maybe I missed it.
We do several of those considerations, Ellie, but it's not in the actual equity score calculation right now. So the equity score calculation is pretty simplistic with Portlanders that are diverse, youth, and the populations of poverty. And the reason we kept it pretty simple is because the more factors you put into it, the more it complicates it. But we do have those discussions continuously with every capital project prioritization process, and we prioritize taking care of any ADA issues every time we do a capital project.
I would say that it's I would highly encourage that you consider putting it into the actual score and how things are looked at, in addition to the disability community, right, including everyone from, and higher proportions of low income, more than huge numbers of disabled folks live in long-term poverty, about twice the rate as other people. It certainly impacts BIPOC communities, kids, and it's about 15% of the overall population at large. So I would highly encourage that to be a factor that is, it's great that it's in conversation, but if it's not built into the DNA of something, then it doesn't quite get the same love.
We'll totally look into that, Ellie. Thanks for that comment.
Thank you, Ellie.
I think board members that have been on for a while, the annual allocation of major maintenance that comes to the parks, about $5 million a year. $1 million of that goes to our accessibility program to work on our ADA transition plan. It's woefully underfunded, so like that could easily be $10 million a year, but just to give you a sense of like 20% of the dollars we get every year from City Council are going to the accessibility improvements.
Thank you. Randy.
So 2024 election is going to be a big one. What are you guys thinking about the possibility of putting forward a bond on that ballot?
Yeah, so we're in consultation with Commissioner Ryan and the current City Council to see like what due diligence we might be able to do this fall. And I think we might have an update maybe next month we can share at the board meeting to see if we can get some traction on that. But yeah, there's 2 elections, one in May where the referral would have to happen in January. And then obviously in November, and we'd have to do a referral by July. So that's definitely on the radar.
Thank you. Alana?
First off, Lauren, thank you for sharing that slide about the prioritization. I know that's something that's come up in past meetings, and I think I missed it the last time we had it in a slide deck. So I really appreciate seeing that specifically what the prioritization process is. Sarah, one of the things that we didn't have time to get into a lot today is thinking about those next steps and what some of the options are there. But you mentioned earlier that, of course, in the past, one of the things that was recommended was a parks district. And it occurs to me that we have a number of new board members now who may not have seen all of the data on that. And it's probably been a while for the rest of us too. And I'm wondering if you could share out and follow up to this conversation to the board, the data that looked at what the funding possibilities actually were, how compression would impact a separate parks district, what some of the funding streams were that were considered and how much money would come in from each of them. Either share it out to the whole board, or if we could pull together folks who are interested in digging a little deeper there to make sure that people have that front of mind.
Absolutely, we can share that out, and it is also on the Sustainable Future website. So we have kind of the full deck of the suite of funding options that we looked at, including kind of the compression impacts, the revenue potential. So it's up there as well, but I will share it specifically.
Perfect, thank you.
And I know there's like a quorum issue always, but like we could do it at Fezziwig as well. and then invite other members to come, and the ones that have maybe seen it before, like Bonnie, maybe they don't come. You know, there's a variety. Let us know how the best way to do that is.
Talk about that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So Chris, looks like you're the last one that has a board question.
It's more of a comment. I just wanted to say thank you to Sarah and Lauren for an overview of the prioritization and project score structure. That was really helpful to have that insight. And I just wanted to make a comment that the resource allocation of only $5 million annually in the general fund is incredibly low for the amount of assets that this bureau has, but it's going to, and this leaves us in a place where board advocacy and community engagement is going to be very important moving forward, because under the city administrator structure, the city staff will be even in a more limited in being able to set a policy pathway forward, because they will really be at the behest of what the city administrator sets as priorities for all of the bureaus. And so it will be on community to engage our elected officials to make movement on what is allocated in the general fund moving forward. And I just wanted to have that as a comment, because I know staff might be limited once the new city organizational structure is put into place on what you can say and advocate for.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Corbin, it looks like Rich has his hand up too.
Yes, Rich along with Gretchen are two community commenters. So we're going to be getting to them shortly. Thank you for acknowledging that. It looks like, thank you for that report. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to getting more information. So we are going, before we adjourn, we have two community members that want to give public comment. The first person I have on my list is Gretchen Cole. You want to come on and have a seat. Thank you so much for bearing with us.
Oh my gosh, thank you guys.
So just really quickly, don't give out your personal information, no phone numbers or emails. Staff will definitely link up with you if they need that. You have 2 minutes, and thank you so much for coming today. So go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Gretchen Cole, and I'm a Grant Park resident, parent to 2 student athletes at Grant High School, and a native Portlander. My comments tonight center around the importance of the Grant Bowl as a community asset. The Grant Bowl Community Coalition is focused on 3 things: urging Portland Parks and Portland Public Schools to open the bowl now, making it an equitable field in alignment with the rest of the high school athletic facilities in Portland, and ensuring the long-term public use of the bowl. This park is truly the center of our Northeast neighborhood and school community, yet our students can't use it as a part of their school community. Regarding the Grant Bowl master plan, it calls for 6 rows of benches built into the hillside, not above. These updates will make the field accessible for students, guardians, and community members regardless of physical capability. The master plan also calls for public access from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., similar to current daylight hours, and current access to the park. I'd like to point out the successful public use of Franklin and Lincoln as the model we can strive for. Current lighting technology allows for better directional placement of field lights. The lights on the upper field are a perfect example of how fields can be lit without causing dramatic changes to the neighbor experience. And I can say this honestly as I can see those lights from my yard. I urge you to prioritize the repair, upgrade to the master plan, and opening of the Grant Bowl by working closely with PPS and even granting a long-term lease. Thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate your work, thoughtfulness, and advocacy for our public spaces.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we have Rich. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I had 2 questions and or comments. One was, it seems surprising to me that in the 2020 ballot issue that was passed, that it was a $2 billion, my understanding is it was a $2 billion assessment, but yet none of those funds are used for capital maintenance, that the funds were used to increase access to the facilities, but yet not increase maintenance for the facilities. That seems almost a design train wreck in terms of a funding situation. So that's my first question, is that's really the case, that none of these funds from the from the assessment can be used for ongoing maintenance. The second question was regarding, I believe one of your speakers mentioned something like 100 different boards that are advisory boards to the city. Is there any information on how those 100 or more advisory boards are going to somehow be incorporated into this new administrative structure that the city is planning? And those are the only questions I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich.
Would you like to try that?
If you can.
So this
is not traditional because we don't usually answer questions during our comment section. So
special treatment tonight, Rich, since you stayed around so long.
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Todd Lofgren, Deputy Director at Parks. I mentioned earlier in the meeting that there's in the draft from Mike Jordan, the Chief Administrative Officer, there is a boards and commissions role for the assistant city administrator that reports directly to the city administrator. So the coordination and the future kind of policies around that would be coordinated there. So that's not like an answer of what that plan will be or how those policies will be, or what they will be, but that's the location in the proposed organizational chart. So that's for that. And the first comment question about the November 2020 Parks levy, it is an operating levy, so it can provide services for the day-to-day maintenance, even small repairs to things like synthetic turf or raking the crumb rubber on synthetic turf. But the actual capital replacement, so at the end of useful life, that's a capital maintenance repair. And traditionally those are funded through Parkland Parks, either the limited amount of major maintenance funds we get, which is about that $5 million a year, or through bonds. And the last time we passed a bond at Parks was in 2014.
Thank you for answering those.
Sure.
Thank you for being here, Rich. And with that, it looks like we're adjourning our meeting.
Sorry, Dr. Corbin.
Yes.
We did have a comment in the chat from Emily.
Yes.
I don't know if Emily wanted to go off mute to make this comment, or I can read the comment for you.
I'm driving, so if you could read it, that would be great.
Sure.
Yes, please.
She said, I noticed that on the list of sports fields at high risk for closure, 3 of the Delta Park fields are on that list. And we just heard from Todd Lofgren that using those fields now and until Grant's turf is replaced is our kids' only option. What happens if you close those fields where then will Grant students bus there for the practices and home games? Is this being considered when determining how urgent turf replacement is for this fall?
Yeah, so those fields are fine for play now, but the useful life of synthetic turf fields is about 8 to 10 years. And Lauren or Sarah, I don't know if you're still here, but I believe those fields are due to be replaced in the next 2 or 3 years. Is that right? Is that where we are?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I think we're fine for Grant High School's use over this next year. I think it was on the list because it's something that we should be planning for, just like the Grant Bowl. We want to plan ahead, years ahead. So funding sources are identified, so there's not a break in service. And was there something else?
A follow-up comment from Virginia.
Okay.
If we can have that in just like ordinance.
Yeah. I will include the chat.
And maybe Nicholas said this or people saw it in the chat, but she did put a link in the chat for Mike Jordan's proposed. Did everyone see that? I just want to make sure.
I think if you can email.
We just
We'll be sending out an email
everything.
tomorrow morning.
Okay, we'll send it around to get tomorrow morning.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And thank you board members for staying overtime to support community comments. Really appreciate that. And so we're going to be adjourning at 7:23 p.m. Thank you so much, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks. I have a question.